Good afternoon, everyone. Before we start our presentation, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and we will be sending out the link. Should be available by early next week via email, so you should all receive that. Additionally, the chat function is turned off. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A console. And we will be answering the questions during the presentation. And we will also have a Q&A session at the end of our presentation. So please make sure that you stay for that. And with that, Martin, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Appreciate your time. My name is Martin Pena, and I am one of the product managers from the Oracle Enterprise Manager product management team. Today, we're going to be talking about how to standardize and automate database operations on Exadata. And essentially, we'll be talking about how to use database provisioning to increase scale, efficiency, and security using Enterprise Manager 13.4 and our database lifecycle management capabilities. First, I'm just going to show you the standard Oracle Safe Harbor statement. I'm sure you've seen this before. So just take a second to glance through this. And just very quickly to give you an outline of what we'll be talking about today, I'm just going to spend a couple minutes talking about Enterprise Manager itself. Hopefully most of you are familiar with Enterprise Manager, but just kind of want to give you a recap of where we are with the product and how the features we are discussing today fit into that roadmap. Then we'll go into the topic in more detail. We'll talk about database provisioning, patching and upgrades, configuration and compliance management, and finish off with database as a service, snap clone, and our self-service provisioning capabilities. At the end, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. So as Deb mentioned, please use the Q&A to post any questions there. We do have some of our panelists who may answer some of these during the presentation itself, but at the end, we'll go through some of the questions and answer those through the audio as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, let's start first with Enterprise Manager. So currently we are at version 13.4. And with this latest release, we've focused on a couple different areas. Basically, in terms of our performance management capabilities, we're looking at increasing the visibility and access to intelligent analytics. So really providing you with more powerful tools to help you identify performance issues and resolve them very quickly. The second pillar is all about our comprehensive lifecycle automation and control. And that's really going to be the essence of our topic for today. Looking at things like how can you take your operations such as provisioning, patching, upgrades, and really simplify those, standardize them, and make them more a part of your management regime. And then the third part of this release has been extending the EM platform itself. So we've done a lot to make the platform more secure, accessible, and extensible. So this is just an overview of 13.4 release. And just for your information, Enterprise Manager 13.5 is scheduled to be released in the first half of this year. So keep your eyes open for that. So let's put this now into the context of database management and engineered systems. So as we talked about with Enterprise Manager, the product is really designed to provide management for the complete Oracle stack. So in addition to database, we manage the underlying operating system hardware, as well as database, middleware, applications, and even third-party systems. But in terms of the database itself, we've really focused on providing a comprehensive management platform for the Oracle database and specifically for Oracle engineered systems such as Exadata. And really the idea behind our management philosophy is not to provide just management for a single target, but really to provide scalable management across the entire fleet or your database estate. So what this means is we're trying to make it easier for you to manage groups and sets of systems and databases rather than just the individual components themselves. So really designed to make your administrators more scalable. And then within all of this, we try to provide very deep dive focus tools that help you centralize your diagnostics, tuning, and your lifecycle activities. So really, on the database side, we provide capabilities regardless of the platform. So whether you're using databases on generic commodity hardware, whether you're taking advantage of Oracle database multi-tenant capabilities, or you're using Exadata. Basically, Enterprise Manager will manage all of these in the same consistent manner, but provide extra deep management for the specific components like Exadata and multi-tenant. So really the idea here is to provide centralized control for all the database lifecycle activities. So whether you're on-premise or cloud, whether you're on engineered systems or commodity systems, whether you're multi-tenant or non-container database, the management operations will be consistent. This is also designed to help you better consolidate your databases. And so by having an overall perspective of the different database components, what their workload is, you're able to better consolidate, standardize, and automate your database operations. And really with this, we're trying to provide a complete on-premise database as a service solution that also provides self-service metering and chargeback capabilities. So really a full, well-rounded solution for all the different database components on all the different platforms. So as we mentioned, we provide some special deep dive into Exadata itself. And this has been a strategic platform for Oracle for several years. And Enterprise Manager reflects this in terms of providing extra deep management into these areas. So just from a high level perspective, we provide a special view in terms of the hardware, Exadata hardware. So as you can see on the screenshot on the right there, we provide a photorealistic view of the components. When you get any alerts or notification on the hardware components, you can actually see it visualized on that screen. And so this includes all the different components, whether it's the database, the compute nodes, the switches, network, storage, etc. So all these are included in the complete Exadata management solution. We provide a special deep dive into the software side of things as well, in terms of looking at performance and availability. We also provide a topology view so you can understand the hierarchy and relationship of all the different components, including database systems, clusters, network components, storage, etc. And then we provide a special configuration view, which gives you a summary of all the different components and also identifies where patches are needed. So let's drill down now and look at some of the database lifecycle management capabilities that we provide. Again, these are appropriate for Exadata, but also applicable as well for other platforms as well. So really, there's a solution here for everyone, regardless of what platform you're looking at. So in terms of database lifecycle management, it's really a very full-featured suite of components and functionality. And I like to think of it sort of like a Swiss Army knife for DBAs. Has a lot of different specialized tools depending on what the DBA actually needs. So as the name database lifecycle management implies, we're looking at the entire life of the database. So we're starting at the provisioning level in terms of how do you actually create your databases, providing consistent automation for provisioning. We provide patch automation, upgrade automation, cloning automation. And cloning is something that we see customers utilizing more and more, especially in agile environments where applications are being modified and upgraded more frequently. Cloning is a great way to give full copies of databases or thin clones of databases to DevOps personnel. So developers, QA engineers, etc. All these people who are involved in helping to really accelerate the deployment of applications, providing clones in an efficient manner can really be beneficial for that. We also provide configuration management capabilities. So the ability to collect configuration information, not only on the database, but also on the Exadata components, but also the underlying hardware, the operating system, the hardware itself, things like storage, network components, as well as other Oracle products across the stack, middleware applications, as well as third-party components. So we collect all that information, put it into our repository, and then we're able to use that for compliance purposes. So compliance is really taking that configuration information, applying rules to it, and help you with any security or auditing exercises that you have. It's also great from a best practice perspective in that you can download and evaluate for best practices from Oracle, from different industry standards, security standards, and even just create gold images or base images from your own environments, the way you'd like your systems to be configured. We also see migration as being a very important area for our customers. So there's many different dimensions to migration. Migrating and upgrading from, for instance, commodity hardware to Exadata. We can help you with that automation. Migration from on-premise to cloud solutions as well is supported. And also migrating from non-container database architecture to multi-tenant architecture as well. So migration is coming up more and more as a requirement, and our lifecycle management tools can assist with that automation. And then finally, as I mentioned a couple times, Oracle multi-tenant is more and more something that customers are looking into with database 21. It becomes a required architecture. And so whether you're using multi-tenant already or new to the solution, the guided workflows within Enterprise Manager can really assist with getting administrative teams familiar with the best practices for deploying and managing multi-tenant. So I think we've talked about some of the challenges and requirements already, but basically what we're trying to do is help customers to standardize their environments, make sure that databases are deployed in consistent ways. And when you have that standardization, that's going to assist with consolidation exercises and also assist with the automation that's required across the entire operational lifecycle of the databases itself. So these are really some of the things we're trying to address with our solution here. So let's go ahead and drill down into each one of these areas. And we'll start out at the beginning with database provisioning. And the idea here is really to make sure that when databases are provisioned, they're provisioned in a consistent, standardized way. And also by taking advantage of automation, we can help minimize the errors, potential errors that would happen with manual or one-off provisioning exercises. So here we'll talk about provisioning, cloning, and migration, and talk about what we do with our lifecycle management solution. So for provisioning, we provide complete automation for deployment of all the different software required to provision a database. So not only the database binaries themselves, but also the grid infrastructure. We really support this standardization through use of a couple tools, gold images and profiles, which are the tools that the administrators would use to basically provision in a consistent manner. Think of these kind of as the templates or recipes for how you would like your databases deployed. On the cloning side, we provide a wide range of functionality for that. So first of all, we support different types of clones, full clones through RMAN backups, hot clones on the multi-tenant side, and also we take advantage of thin clones through this various storage platforms. And so you can really pick and choose depending on the requirement you have for the specific operation or application. Because cloning can become very confusing in terms of managing the clones, we provide a clone management dashboard. And through this, administrators can keep track of the lineage and hierarchy of the different clones and make sure that you don't come up with what we call clone sprawl, where there's too many clones out there, perhaps none of them being used, and perhaps using excessive storage. So it's really a great way to manage the clones, manage the underlying resources required to deliver those. And then finally, we have tools to help you rapidly create test masters. Test masters are the foundation for the clones. And basically, it's an initial full clone that's required before you do the thin clones or the hot clones. And Enterprise Manager can really help simplify that creation process. As mentioned before, migration has several different aspects to it. So we support many different ones. The ones I'd like to focus on here is basically the on-premise to cloud solution. So as we see more and more customers exploring the cloud, a great way to do that is to take an existing on-premise database, move it up to the cloud. And so as I'll show you in a bit, we have tools that help you go through that planning process, actually help you with the migration, and then help you validate the end result. We also can help you with migration for consolidation exercises in terms of converting non-CDBs to multi-tenant pluggable databases. So these are just a couple of the migration exercises that we support. I talked about that we provide tools to help you automate provisioning of databases, and I really wanted to reinforce that it's not just for single instance databases. We support all the different database configurations that the Oracle database provides. So rack databases, CHA, multi-tenant, even the underlying grid infrastructure. And we provide things like the ability to scale up and scale down with rack nodes as well. So again, this is done through gold images and profiles. And one of the interesting things we have with this is the ability to identify different roles in terms of the administrators involved in the provisioning exercises. So in larger organizations, we provide for the ability to have the role of a designer. And the designer would essentially be a more senior DBA who would basically design the configuration of the database and create provisioning profiles that would then be later executed to actually provision the database. So the senior DBA as a designer would create that provisioning profile. And then when it actually comes to provisioning database, a more junior DBA could then serve as the operator. So this is a great way to share knowledge across the administrator teams. But we also provide the ability to lock down different parameters. So for instance, if the designer is interested in making sure only certain parameters are editable, they can either lock those down or leave them open so that when the operator actually runs the provisioning for a specific database, they have that choice. So again, a lot of flexibility included in this process. I mentioned that we provide automation for multi-tenant lifecycle management. And again, for Exadata and even Exadata Cloud Customer, this can be a great solution in terms of provisioning these pluggable databases. So as you can see here, we provide everything from creating the pluggable databases. We can do the migration, the conversion. We can do cloning, plugging, unplugging, dropping the database. All the different components of the lifecycle of the pluggable database can be supported through the GUI here and also done at scale. So as we see customers migrating from non-CDBs to PDBs, again, we have the migration tools to help support this. And so depending on the version of the database you're migrating from, and also your requirements, we have different technologies that Enterprise Manager can utilize for that. So for certain databases, we can take advantage of data pump. For others, we can do incremental RMAN. And for others, we can do plug as a PDB. So again, Enterprise Manager can provide the flexibility and also the intelligence to make sure that you do and choose the correct process in terms of the migration exercise. I wanted to focus just for a bit on a new tool that we introduced at the end of last year, which is the Migration Workbench. And this is really designed to help with the migration through all the different scenarios we talked about. In its first iteration, it's focused on moving from on-premise to autonomous database. And what the product does is basically helps you plan for that migration exercise. It can help answer questions like, what databases can I consolidate? What database shapes should I use? And identify any dependencies that are needed for that migration. It can then go through the actual migration itself, choosing the right migration exercise. And then finally, at the end, it can help validate to make sure that the performance of the new target is appropriate by comparing it with the performance of the previous target as well. So what this does is help deliver a more secure, a more efficient, and a more agile environment for your migrations. And here I'll just show you sort of a simplified screenshot demo of what this looks like. And so in this environment here, you can see that we can select the source database type. So in this case, we're selecting a database 12C. Then we need to select the destination target type. So we'll choose autonomous database. And then based on this, Enterprise Manager and the Migration Workbench will recommend the migration vehicle. In this case, it'll be data pump, and then go through the various steps that we talked about earlier. So as I mentioned, this is currently available for migration from on-premise to cloud. We'll be providing additional cloud variants throughout the year, and also on-premise to on-premise solution as well. So the next area is about patching automation. And as we talk to customers, I find that this is pretty much a universal pain point for many customers. The patching process can be very difficult from many perspectives. Probably the biggest perspective is the downtime, the maintenance windows required to do the patching. Those can be difficult, especially for mission critical applications. But equally important is trying to first identify what patches are required on the different targets, and also to provide the automation to make sure that that maintenance window is as small as possible. So a lot of different challenges for administrators. So with Enterprise Manager and Database Lifecycle Management, we've introduced a feature called Fleet Maintenance. And what this does is it provides an automated, scalable patching solution and an upgrade solution. Both patching and upgrades are done out of place. And what makes this very efficient is that we have a subscription-based model, which means, again, we're doing things at scale. So on the initial setup, what you do is you subscribe databases to specific gold images of the Oracle homes. And then any subsequent patching or upgrade exercises are really simplified based on that subscription. What we've seen is that customers are able to do some very impressive scalable patching operations with minimal downtime. So we've seen customers patch hundreds of clusters at a time, thousands of databases in a single patching window. And this solution supports PSUs, RUs, and all the different database versions from 11.204 forward. One interesting part of the solution is something we call the Software Standardization Advisor. So this is an advisory that basically scans your environment looks at the configuration for all the different databases, figures out the current patching level and the Oracle homes, and then recommends a more standardized solution for you. So I'm going to jump to a screenshot here of this. So this is a screenshot that we did several years ago, one of our customers here in the Bay Area. And as you can see, they had about 2,700 databases in their EM environment. And the Software Standardization Advisor found that, as you can see on the left-hand pie chart, there were 295 unique Oracle homes in that environment. So essentially 1 in every 6 Oracle homes were different. So from a standardization perspective, this was not doing very well. But the great part of the Standardization Advisor is it's able to look at each of the databases, the version, and the current patch level, and basically come up with a recommended software configuration for those Oracle homes. And as you can see in this particular case, it came up with a recommended solution of 8 unique Oracle homes that would satisfy these 2,700 databases. So this is really one of the places where Enterprise Manager can provide some great value in terms of advisories, looking at your existing environment, looking at available patches, and coming up with a optimized solution for you. Let me go through some of the steps involved in fleet maintenance in terms of patching. And so really just 3 steps at a very high level: scanning the fleet through the software advisor we just showed you earlier. Then we create a new image of the Oracle home and subscribe databases to it. And then finally, we push that new image of the Oracle home and then do a switch at the very end. Here's a list of the steps in a more granular level. And really moving to the second step, we create the gold image. Then we subscribe databases to that gold image. We deploy the image, and then we do the switch at the end. And so essentially everything except that last step, switch, is done outside of the maintenance window. And this is what enables us to really provide a reduced maintenance window for these patching operations. Only during that last step, when you switch, do you migrate the listener, run any SQL, and we can also do any sort of cleanup of the old Oracle homes as part of that as well. So let me give you a little animation of that process just to show you how that works. In this example, we're looking at 3 18.3 databases, and we'd like to patch them to 18.6. So you can see those 3 Oracle databases share a 18.3 Oracle home. What we would do first is create a gold image for this environment. So we would create the 18.6 gold image. What we then do is we subscribe those databases to the gold image. And then when we're ready, we can deploy that Oracle home to the servers where those 18.3 databases are at. That 18.6 Oracle home then becomes what we call a shadow image. It's inactive, but it's there ready and waiting to be used. And then when we're ready to actually create a maintenance window, we can actually do the updates. So this is the only time when we need to actually be in the maintenance window. We do the switch, and now the 18.6 Oracle home becomes the active Oracle home. If needed, we can do any rollback if the patch supports that. And then also at this point, we can do any cleanup. So once you're sure that the original Oracle home is not needed, Enterprise Manager can actually remove the original Oracle home and recover that space. So this is the process. And as I mentioned, the nice part about this is once this process is configured, then when we go to the next exercise for 18.7, because we've already set up the subscription model, basically those steps can just be repeated very quickly after that new Oracle home is updated. I wanted to mention as well is that if you're using any of our DBaaS solutions, which I'll talk about at the end, basically the upgrade or the patch would then be enabled for the self-service administrator. So if you're in this environment, this is a self-service portal that a non-DBA could use to request databases. And if there is a patch or an upgrade available for that database, there's a button there that will be highlighted, and they can choose to patch or update that database whenever is appropriate for them. So it basically gives them self-service control for those processes. So let's move further into the security and compliance area. And especially for Exadata, this can be a very important area in terms of understanding the relationship of all the different components, not only the database, but the storage and the network components, making sure they're all working together and conforming to best practices. So what we see with security challenges today is basically oftentimes there are unknown vulnerabilities out there. So administrators aren't aware of what to look for. They have limited visibility into the compliance status of the different targets. Also, there's no visibility into the assets. So understanding how many databases you have out there, what version they're at, what patch level they're at. All these things can expose risks. And so what we're really looking for is a enterprise-wide tool that can look across the entire enterprise, cut through the complexity, and really assess the database security posture for all these different components, and make sure that they're conforming to best practices, whether it's the internal best practices of your organization, industry best practices, or Oracle best practices for the different types of database targets. So we start this out with configuration management, which is really collecting configuration information across all the different targets. And with this, we provide a complete configuration and inventory collection, not only for the database, not only for Exadata, but for the underlying host, operating system, and any additional software, whether it's Oracle software, third-party software that's on the server itself. And so when you install the Oracle Enterprise Manager agent, it automatically starts collecting configuration information for all these different components. And by default, we collect it once every 24 hours. And if there are any changes between collections, we identify that as a change. And so this essentially becomes a configuration inventory database. And you can search across this configuration information. So if you want to find out other targets that use a specific initialization parameter, for instance, you can do that. If you want to compare configurations, if you have two databases that should be configured the same, you want to make sure that's the case, you can do a real-time comparison. You can also do historical comparisons. If a certain target today is not performing well, but yesterday it was, you might want to first check and see if there are any configuration changes done between yesterday and today. You can get that information instantaneously through this feature. So really very powerful, not only for inventory purposes, but also for performance diagnostics purposes as well. And also to make sure that you're maintaining your best practices across the environment. So again, we're collecting this information across the entire stack. You can view the inventory information ad hoc. You can compare configurations. You can search and basically look across all this valuable configuration information across the stack for each of your servers and also across the entire enterprise. We provide the ability as well to have you extend this collection information. So you can create your own extensions, configuration extensions for specific targets. So if we're not collecting the type of information you need, you can extend that either through querying specific files through an OS command, any sort of scripts, or even a SQL query. So very flexible in terms of extending the configuration information that we collect. So once we collect this information, it's useful for the purposes we just talked about, but it becomes very powerful when we add it to our compliance management features. And so what this really does is it enables you to do auditing and configuration drift across your targets. And so it's a way to basically proactively validate and check standards based on reference configurations. So whether it's different security rules or configuration best practices, basically you can create these rules, run them against the configuration information, and then be alerted through notifications or dashboards when there are violations. And so this is very useful for rapidly changing configuration environments or environments where you really want to make sure that the environment stays set to a specific configuration standard and that you avoid configuration drift. We also enable you to apply rules from different industry standards. For instance, STIG and CIS, Center for Internet Security, have become very popular lately for enforcing security standards. So with the product, we provide out-of-box standards from a wide range of sources. So we provide, of course, Oracle best practices and security recommendations. We provide STIG benchmarks. These are the ones that come from the US Department of Defense. And these are applied for different targets, such as the Oracle database, WebLogic server. There's also things like AuraCheck and Exacheck for Exadata environments. So essentially, we have thousands of these checks in our compliance library. And these can be, you can pick and choose depending on which ones are useful for your environment. You can also modify them to best suit your specific requirements. And then an interesting feature as well is that we provide the ability to do automated remediation. So through the Enterprise Manager job system, we're able to take what we call corrective actions. So you can instruct Enterprise Manager that if it detects a violation that's important enough for you, that Enterprise Manager can actually take the step to introduce corrective actions to set that configuration standard back to where it should be. So here, basically, we're demonstrating the workflow in terms of how to standardize on a secure configuration. So basically, we're using Enterprise Manager to collect this reference configuration information, to do comparisons, and then Enterprise Manager will analyze the results, identify any deviations, and then if necessary, take any remediation on that. So this is how you can instruct Enterprise Manager to continuously scan your environment and to take corrective action if needed. So again, I just wanted to sort of reinforce some of the key standards that are included with the product. So we have the Center for Internet Security benchmark standards for the different versions of the Oracle database. For STIG, we have those recommendations as well for the Oracle database, as well as Oracle best practices and security recommendations. So again, these are customizable. You can pick and choose which ones are appropriate for your environment, but also modify them to best suit your best practices. Here, I'm just giving an example of a couple of the different rules, but showing you sort of the focus and the granularity of these different rules. So if you're using RAC, there's specific compliance standards for RAC, for cluster databases, for multi-tenant pluggable databases, et cetera. So really very specific. And so think of this as a great way to proactively manage your environment to avoid problems in the future. And as I mentioned before, one of the key aspects of Enterprise Manager is to avoid managing at a target by target level and to be able to manage across groups or sets of systems, as well as across the entire database estate. And so here's a great example of this, where with the compliance framework, you can have dashboards set up that will scan across groups of databases and tell you how well your different standards are applying across those targets. So here you can see that we're looking at database security, system security, WebLogic security, and we can scan across the entire environment rather than looking at individually. We can see how well we're scoring on these. And if the score drops below a critical threshold, we can decide to look at the individual violations and take corrective action to get that score back up to where we need it to be. So the final area I'd like to talk about is database as a service. And this is really taking a lot of the automation we've talked about previously and really taking it up a notch in terms of being able to provide self-service capabilities for non-DBAs. Everything we've talked about before has sort of been automation tools to help the DBAs themselves. This is really a solution that provides a portal for non-DBAs to do specific tasks. So let's go and look at some of the capabilities here. Really, the essence of this solution is the self-service portal, which you see a screenshot of here on the right. And what this does, it provides a very safe place for non-DBAs to request databases, clones of databases, and to manage those. So when you set this up, basically this is set up by a database administrator, and then you give access to self-service users, and they can come into this, only see what's available to them. They have a specific quota, and they really can't get to any other part of Enterprise Manager. So I like to think of this as like a padded cell for non-DBAs. They can come in here and do what they need to do, but they can't really affect any other part of the database environment. Based on the requirements, the self-service administrator can set up different service profiles for the users in terms of the service catalog, what type of databases they can deploy. So those can be very simple single instance databases, can be rack databases, can be container databases, pluggable databases. All different kind of databases are supported here. And so when the user is coming to the portal here, they can go to the self-service catalog, choose the type of database they want, and then provision it. And in most cases, in a matter of minutes, that will be provisioned for them. They can then use it and then do whatever DevOps functionality they want to on it, work on it as a developer, use it as a QA engineer, etc. So it's a great way to sort of take some of the burden off of DBAs for doing provisioning for these different users and enabling them to do it on their own. One of the use cases in this, in addition to simply provisioning empty databases, is to do snap clone, which is our thin cloning solution. And this has been very popular with customers who are doing DevOps, who need to give these full copies of databases to non-DBAs. And this would normally be towards the audience of developers or QA engineers. And so traditionally in the past, if there was a need to give a copy of the database to these users, if it's a very large multi-terabyte database, it would take a lot of time to do a full copy and also be very expensive in terms of storage. With SnapClone, what we're able to do is take advantage of the copy on write technology at the storage level and create a full copy very quickly, but also reduce the storage associated with this. And we do this through the copy on write technology at the storage level, basically not doing a full clone, but basically providing pointers to the original storage itself. And so this is very useful on a couple of storage platforms. If you're using ZFS storage appliance, as well as Exadata sparse disk as well. This is very useful on those different platforms. And the way this works is you take your production database, you then create a test master, which is a full copy that's done just one time. And from there, anytime someone requests a thin clone, they can basically request those clones. So these become functional copies, and they're provisioned very quickly and with reduced storage. So this is very useful for functional testing, development exercises, things like that. For things like performance testing, normally that would require an actual full clone. But there are many uses for these, and we see customers more and more taking advantage of this. With the self-service portal, one of the interesting features is the chargeback capability. So because users are provisioning and requesting databases on their own, we have a mechanism to basically meter the resources that are involved in provisioning those databases and keeping track of those. So this metering chargeback capability enables administrators to set up charge plans. And to be honest, in most cases, I see customers using this as a reporting tool, not as a chargeback tool. But it's a great way to identify what resources are being used by which groups. And by default, when you implement this feature, not only can you look at it on a user by user basis, but you can assign it to line of business so you can understand which group is using different resources, storage, CPU, memory, etc. And it's great from a management perspective, especially when new resources are required to understand who's been using the existing resources. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that with our solutions, again, we address these both on-premise, but also at the cloud level as well. And with this self-service portal capability, we've recently introduced the ability to add cloud targets to this as well. So when your users are requesting something from the service catalog, you can have the target be a cloud target as well as on-premise. And you can decide to expose that difference to the user or not. So it's really just part of the service catalog, and we can basically extend cloud services to that cloud pool that we have for this DBaaS solution. So I think with that, I'm just going to point out a peak solution report that we have. So a lot of what we've talked about here is about how you can take advantage of these lifecycle automation tools to help reduce operational costs. And so this is a report that came out last year. I'll just browse through it quickly, but it gives a lot of information in terms of how you can actually look at the ROI savings of implementing these tools over time. And so that's available for you for more information. So with that, I'd like to cut it over to Q&A.